The Indian Prime Minister just a few minutes back has announced that the New Delhi Leaders' Declaration has indeed been adopted. Remember, this of course is a big diplomatic victory for India because not every leader present at G20 had been talking the same language on Ukraine and many other contentious issues. But the fact that hectic diplomacy and talks were held to arrive at a consensus to adopt the New Delhi Leaders' Declaration, in fact, points to the fact that India has been able to get all of these nations on the same page. The Indian Prime Minister congratulated all the Sherpas for achieving this tremendous task and has also lauded them for their hard work. Listen in to what he had to say.
और आप सभी के सहयोग से नई दिल्ली G20 लीडर्स समिट डिक्लेरेशन पर सहमति बनी है। मेरा प्रस्ताव है कि इस लीडर्स डिक्लेरेशन को भी एडॉप्ट किया जाए। मैं इस डिक्लेरेशन को एडॉप्ट करने की घोषणा करता हूं। इस अवसर पर मैं हमारे मंत्रीगण, शेरपा और सभी अधिकारियों का हृदय से अभिनंदन करता हूं, जिन्होंने अथाक परिश्रम करके इसे सार्थक किया है।
So the New Delhi Leaders' Declaration, of course, focuses on strong, sustainable, balanced and inclusive growth, accelerating progress on sustainable development goals, green development pact for a sustainable future, multilateral institutions for the 21st century, and also reinvigorating multilateralism to deal with many of the issues that the world is confronted with. Now, this big announcement has come after reports of a consensus between the delegates. There have also been reports that the Ukraine section in the draft declaration has been left empty. Now, India's G20 Sherpa Amitabh Kant has also shared the news on his X, that was formerly known as Twitter, platform. Now, Amitabh Kant posted, "Today's era must be marked as the golden age of human-centric globalization, and India's G20 presidency under the leadership of the Indian Prime Minister has worked tirelessly towards this goal." All right, now to give us more perspective about the G20 summit and also the fact that there's been consensus that's now been arrived for the New Delhi Leaders' Declaration, we're being joined in by Professor Dr. Hussain Bakhti, who's a political analyst and also the chairman of the Foreign Policy Institute. He's joining us live from Turkey. Now, Professor Hussain Bakhti, this of course is a crucial moment in world diplomacy. G20 positions itself as the voice of the global South, and the fact that the 20 big nations, including the European Union and the African Union, which has now become a part of G20, they're all present, the leaders of these nations are present, and there is consensus that has been arrived broadly on most issues. It is, of course, a big win for the global South. What's your take on this, sir?
First of all, India plays an important role in global politics with this summit, and very successful at the end to bring so many nations together, and that the African Union is now a new member of this is another important development concerning global South, as you say. And the issues will be discussed there which concern the entire humanity, from family to war, from peace to climate crisis. But the political issues like a common declaration on Russian-Ukrainian war probably will be not the case so far, that China and Russia did not come. as representatives of these countries' presidents, but they send their representatives. But still, even if without China and without Russia, the summit is a success to my understanding. At least it is a platform which will continue, and all the tries now to get a common consensus about certain global issues will be discussed, and we will see how at the end of the day there will be a summit declaration fully accepted by all nations or not. It is a subject to be weighed.
Absolutely, indeed. We, of course, await the fine print, the actual contents of what is inside the New Delhi Leaders' Declaration. We'll get to know the contents of it in just a bit from now. But Professor Bakshi, I also want you to weigh in, in the manner in which all the world leaders have, of course, congregated in the Indian capital, New Delhi. The Chinese leader and the Russian leader are, of course, absent, but the fact that the rest of the world has been able to come together and talk about crucial issues. G20 is a forum that is to address economic issues. But do you think the G20 Summit and forums such as G20 Summit, which are meant to address economic issues, also get overshadowed by certain political issues that plague the world at this moment?
Yes, I think it should. In the previous meetings, this is already the 18th meeting of G20. Many global political issues have been discussed and debated, but this time the number of the states increased. That African Union is now coming in, and many countries are members of the BRICS, and all this multilateralism, which you mentioned in the beginning, is now shaping the world institutional and organizational structure. So America probably will be balanced by Russia, China, and India, but at the same time, Indian Prime Minister met American President, and I think India, with this summit, will get much more global weight in international politics in Asia particularly. And I think this is why China, America, Russia, plus India is now under the discussion in the world politics. So newcomer is India to my mind.
Absolutely, indeed. Now, Professor Bakshi, I also want you to weigh in a bit about the very interesting position that Turkey is also in and how it approaches the G20 grouping. Yeah. Now, the Turkish President, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, is, of course, in New Delhi. Turkey is a very interesting nation, considering that it is a part of the NATO military alliance. It's a close ally of the United States. But at the same time, it's a nation that actually deals with Russia and other nations as well. So how does Turkey, in fact, approach a forum like G20, considering the very interesting geopolitical position that Turkey is in?
Exactly. Turkey's geopolitical position makes Turkey a global player, and the presence of Turkish president there is important in order to have certain hotspots issues in the Caucasia, Middle East, Black Sea, and I think Turkey is also dealing with this grain deal issue, and Turkish president met this morning also the Japanese prime minister. So grain deal is very important, that Turkey has very close relations with Russia. Turkey's president met Vladimir Putin in Sochi last week, and I think Turkey makes a balance of power politics in regional sense, and Turkey is one of the biggest economies, of course, in this region. So this is why Turkey's presence is important there, not as the powerhouse, but as a modified middle power, trying to contribute for the world's problems and stability and peace process between Ukraine and Russia. Turkey is trying to mediate successfully twice last year, and still Turkey is the only country, as you said rightly, member of NATO, negotiating with the European Union, but has having open channels to Russian President Vladimir Putin. So this is a very ambivalent balance of power policy of Turkey, which is very important also for Turkish-American relations, because America is not only a member of NATO, but at the same time, the Turkish-American bilateral relations in the regional context plays a very important role. And I think Turkey, in this respect, is also looking forward to cooperate more with India in the coming years. So far, I can see.
That's an interesting point that you raised, that India and Turkey can, of course, cooperate more. Because when you look at the war in Ukraine and the positions that different nations have taken, India and Turkey have certain points of convergence. The fact that India has very good relations with the West, with the United States and other countries of Europe, but at the same time, India also has good relations with Russia. And India has said that the way forward is for peace to happen through negotiations, because war is simply not the solution for any crisis. That is the Indian position. Likewise, Turkey also has an interesting position where it is closely allied with the NATO nations, but at the same time, it purchases weapons, hardware from the Russians, such as the S-400 deal that the Turkey nation has in fact got from Russia. So both these nations have in fact taken, some would say, a similar sort of a stance in the Ukraine war. Do you think India and Ukraine can get more nations to come together and get the other nations to understand that the way forward is not by trying to isolate nations, the way forward is not through war and through financial sanctions, but instead is by sitting across each other on a negotiating table?
Yes, you rightly mentioned, first of all, Turkey and India now important global players in diplomacy and in politics. Concerning Russian-Ukrainian war, definitely Turkey and India are two countries which indeed have purchased S-400 missiles system from Russia. Turkey does not deploy those systems at the moment because of NATO strategy, but therefore Russia and Ukraine war has to come to an end. The negotiations should start as soon as possible. Probably today, in the final communique, I expect that there will be a suggestion to have more territorial integrity discussion of two countries and not anymore to see that the war continues. It does not help anyone, including Turkey and India. So I think in the final communique, also the issue of sanctions should be probably expected to be reduced, or at least that Russia is not anymore suffering so much under this, giving a signal for the negotiations with Ukraine concerning the territorial integrity of Ukraine and Russia. But therefore, the American president's meeting with the Indian Prime Minister Modi is important. They talked face to face, and I think looking from Turkey perspective, also Russia and India and America are the global allies of Turkey in the long run. So this is a new phenomenon also for Turkish foreign policy.
I think it's interesting that you're saying that India and Turkey are in fact new allies to take on with the many different issues of the world. But India and Turkey also have some differences which probably can be ironed out. But I want you to weigh in on how Turkey approaches India's position on multilateralism. India has been talking about reforms at the UNSC. India says that bodies such as the UNSC in fact represent the reality that existed at the end of the Second World War, and now new institutions are needed which would give a greater say to the global south and would reflect the current reality of the 21st century. What is Turkey's position on that?
Of course, I'm not government official, I'm an academic analyst, but I can only tell you, looking from the statements of Turkey's president, he said always that the United Nations system is not anymore realistic, it is obsolete, and the world is bigger than five, meaning the United Nations permanent members. And I think the more global south is developing, the more we have these multilateral new institutions, whether it is BRICS or Shanghai Cooperation. I think in the long run, the unipolar system which lasted in the 90s under American hegemony will not exist anymore. So I think not Turkey, but India is maybe one of the new polars of this multi-structural world in the coming days. So, but Turkey and India can cooperate despite all the existing differences. I mean, if you have differences, then you take the next file. You may not have a common view on all the issues, but the fact remains that Turkey's position to multilateralism, to my view, is very similar like India, and this is what brings two countries more together.
I think that's summed up really well. Thank you very much indeed, Professor Hussein Bakhchi, for joining us and getting us all those details from Istanbul there.
Thank you. Thank you.